Somewhere on this field in northern France, scarred with craters, are the clues to a mystery. Here, a bloody battle was fought to capture one of the most heavily defended German positions of the First World War, Vimy Ridge. A stronghold on the Western Front, this single ridge was honeycombed with more than 20 miles of snaking tunnels, riven by 50 miles of trench and barbed wire, and battered by 6 million tons of artillery shells and mines. The ridge was deemed invincible. For almost 3 years, French and British forces had tried and failed to take the ridge at a cost of more than 200,000 lives. Yet incredibly, the Easter of 1917 saw the Allies do what few thought possible. The Canadians were able to take the ridge in just 4 days. The mystery is, how did they do it? To find out, aviation experts take to the skies to explore the world's first electronic battlefield.
Fire out!
Archaeologists uncover relics, puzzling clues, and weapons still deadly after all these years. Engineers dig deep under the earth, breaking through to the past and a lost city underground.
It goes a long, long way.
And they come face to face with the ghosts that haunt it. Together, they investigate the 3 dimensions of an impossible mission that went from heaven to hell on Vimy Ridge. On the very site where the battle for Vimy Ridge took place, a massive investigation is underway.
Look at that. But it's very funny because we're actually standing on the trenches, and this is how it was dug. It's the sort of thing that you're going to use in the attack down the back of your pack. So when you get onto your new position, you need to start digging in. The guys in Iraq and Afghanistan are digging in with the same shovels. Here we've got a curiosity. The ground just this side of the fence was never ploughed. The result is the trenches show up perfectly and allow us to come in and have a look, just look under the surface and look at those trenches.
Within a few hours of digging, the investigators make a discovery, a reminder of the lives lost here.
There was a lot of very savage fighting going on here before the British and Canadian troops actually even arrived. And when we excavate these sites, you know, we're all thinking of Canadians and British soldiers, but in fact there's an awful lot of French equipment and ammunition lying around from this earlier fighting. And this is what we've got here. You know, this French helmet is a piece of that evidence. It does make you wonder. You know, it's got a story to tell. Whose helmet was it?
The French and English were unable to beat the Germans because they were unable to reach them. Above them on Vimy Ridge, the Germans could see any enemies approaching. Any move up the hill was met by a hail of bullets and bombs and certain death. But somehow Canadian soldiers are able to find a way up the slopes of the ridge.
What I've got here is a account of the battle and about what the Germans thought of the Canadians. He describes it here. It says, on Vimy Ridge, regiments of the 79th Reserve Division awaited the attack in tense anticipation. Deployed against us were 4 of the best English attack divisions, the Canadians. So his nationalities are all a bit muddled up, but he certainly knows who they are and he thinks they're pretty good fighters.
3 of those soldiers would be forever linked to the small Ontario town of Goderich. In the autumn of 1916, as casualties mount on the Western Front, Britain calls out to Canada, one of its dominions, for more men. As British subjects now living in a country barely 50 years old, Canadian soldiers have an identity crisis. 6 out of every 10 are British-born. They feel more British than Canadian. Still, from the very start of the war, men signed up by the thousands to join a newly created Canadian Expeditionary Force, and by 1916, Canada is commanding its own divisions. At some point in their lives, 3 of the small-town soldiers who sign up would live on the same street in Goderich: Percy James, Jack Carter, and Dudley Holmes. Mark George, a military historian and former Army officer, sets out to find out more about the local boys.
Before they leave, those soldiers parade in town here, and the whole town turns out, and this is something which is common to every Canadian town. It would have looked like a small town parade today. Everyone would have turned out, so there would have been people on the grass, people lining the sidewalks. The bands from the battalions would have been leading, playing the Maple Leaf Forever and other good marches. To have the whole community standing there cheering as you go must have been an awesome feeling.
The boys who leave the town square in Goderich march into a war they know little about. In the autumn of 1916, 2 years into the war, the Germans are dug in along a line of trenches that stretches across northern France, from the English Channel to the Swiss border, the Western Front. Locked in a bloody standoff, more than 1 million Allies have been slaughtered by German guns. Vimy Ridge, the stronghold so many had failed to take, is where the new Canadian recruits are headed for what can only be seen as a glorified suicide mission. Down the street from the local theater, above a Goderich TV shop, a trunk is discovered full of Great War letters and mementos from Percy James, one of the soldiers headed straight into the eye of the storm.
It's a great old trunk. Well, that is a German Army belt buckle. This would likely be something which Percy removed from a prisoner or a body of a German that he encountered on the battlefield. It's hard to imagine how lonely it must have been for soldiers like Percy, to leave home in 1914 and the only contact you have with your family is by letter. There's always a little sense of prying, because these really weren't intended for your eyes, but at the same time you can't resist the opportunity to get to know someone, who's been dead for 40 years and who experienced something so monumental and so fundamental to, Canadian identity today. So, dear Father and Mother,
just a line to let you know that everything is all right, and I'm in the boat going down the river. When we reached the ocean, we could see the south shore of Newfoundland. Shortly after, it disappeared, and all we were left with was the open water.
When he reaches the shores of Europe, 23-year-old Percy James, the oldest of 3 children, leaves behind his hometown, his family, his job as a tool maker, and everything he has ever known before.
All we're doing, we're just looking for metallic anomalies. It's a grenade, obviously, but it's either a number 5 or a number 23. I'm quite willing to stake my life on the fact that that wouldn't go off unless you did something really stupid with it, like you sat with a cigarette under it or something like that. What's that near your right foot? Right, over, far.
Well, again, it's more ammunition. You can see there's a whole charger of 5 rounds there. Just lying there. This is all potentially the Vimy Ridge fighting.
In excavating the battlefield at Vimy Ridge, it's obvious that the Canadian forces took firepower to a whole new level. Canada brings in 245 heavy guns, 3 times the number used at the Battle of the Somme, to bolster its bullets and bombs.
What these are the pulls from the fuses, from the Stokes bombs. So they'd actually have the bombs, pull these out, arm the bomb, and then drop it down the mortar, and off it goes. And they must have been really firing them off from that trench over there, one after the other. What I say is, this was the nice end to be at. It was the other end where the Germans were receiving these.